Jack Canfield here. Welcome back to another segment of Talking About Success. My next guest, Dr. Kathi Fry, is what we might call a rare bird in the medical community. She is the world's only licensed OBGYN and master homeopath. We're going to talk about what that is. She's a founding diplomat of the American Board of Integrative and Holistic Medicine and a past president of the American Holistic Medical Association, now known as the Academy of Integrated Health and Medicine. So what motivated you to become a homeopathic doctor when you were already practicing conventional medicine? Why did you add that? What motivated you to do that?
Well, when I got into practice, Jack, I felt like I was being asked to build a cathedral with a screwdriver and a roll of duct tape.
I love that metaphor. That's good.
I just felt like I didn't have enough tools in my toolkit because when you go to medical school and do a surgical specialty like I did, everybody gets the same drug and the same dose over and over again. So if you know 30 different drugs and the right prescription to write, then you can kind of suppress people's symptoms. And then if that doesn't work, then you can always take an organ system out. In my case, because I was an OBGYN, they had bleeding, I would take out their uterus and sometimes their ovaries. But what would happen is people would come back after they'd had their surgery 6 months later. I'd say, so how are you doing? They're like, well, I'm not bleeding anymore. I'm like, yeah, but I've put on 20 pounds and I can't lose it. I have no sex drive. I'm tired all the time. I'm cranky. I'm depressed. And I'd hear this over and over again. And so what I realized was that the practice of medicine that I had been highly trained to do was not enough. It just suppressed people's symptoms. It didn't stimulate their body's ability to heal itself.
Very true, very true. Now, how is homeopathy different than traditional allopathic medicine?
Right. So traditional allopathic medicine works on the principle that if you have a problem, you take something that works against that problem. So it's what we call allos, meaning different or opposite, pathos, meaning suffering. So allopathy or allopathic medicine is different suffering. You give a remedy for something to make something different. Homeopathy is different in that it works at stimulating the body's ability to heal itself. So the word homeo means similar and pathos means suffering, so similar suffering. So in homeopathy, when you give a substance to a healthy person, it will bring on a set of symptoms. And when you see those same set of symptoms in someone who is sick, then you know that's the remedy they need.
Well, say more about that. What does it mean to bring on the same symptoms?
So all the remedies that we use, there's 5,000 of them, and all of those remedies are proven on healthy people. So for example, when they did the proving of chocolate in England, they took a remedy made from chocolate. So what they did was they take the chocolate and they grind it up and they put it in water and they make a mother tincture out of it. And then they take 1 drop of that mother tincture and they put it in 99 drops of water and they pound it 100 times. That's a 1C dilution. Then they take 1 drop of that 1C dilution, put it in 99 drops of water, pound it 100 times, and that's a 2C dilution. And they do that 2 times, 3, 15, 20, 30, 200, 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 times. And the more times you dilute the remedy, the more potent it is. Because everything that God created has a physical component and a spiritual component. And as you dilute out that physical component with different succussions and dilutions, then what it does is it strengthens the vibratory power of that remedy. So when they did the proving of chocolate, for example, they had homeopaths they gave a 3C dilution to, put it on a little pellet, they took it under the tongue, and they didn't tell them what they were being given. So when they took this remedy, they began to develop certain symptoms. And they would write down every single symptom they had, what kind of food cravings they had, were they hot, were they cold, what they dream about, what they think about, what they're afraid of. All of a sudden, they've never been afraid of walking over a bridge, and now they have fear of heights. So in the proving of chocolate, I think they did it, if I remember, they did it on about 30 people. And when they looked at the journals of all the people after the proving, something like 21 people had dreams of hedgehogs. Well, when was the last time you had a dream about a hedgehog, right? I mean, we don't even have hedgehogs in America, but in England, apparently they have these little furry creatures that run around. And something like 19 out of those 30 people who had never had a dream about a hedgehog dreamt about hedgehogs. So when you sit down and you take someone's case, And I always ask them, so tell me, do you ever have dreams that you think about? And if you have someone who says, well, yeah, I dream about hedgehogs, then the first thing you think about is chocolate, because I think there's only like 3 remedies that have dreams of hedgehogs that show up in the proving. So if they have dream of hedgehogs and they love to run and they tend to be pretty hyper and they love chocolate, then chocolate's the remedy they need.
I'm almost regretting asking that question, only because viewers are going to be out there and go, hedgehogs, come on now. So,
right.
So you're asking people what they dream about, and that actually tells you it's a symptomatic thing.
Yes.
That then this homeopathic remedy actually is appropriate for, because the thing in a healthy person brings up that.
Right. So that when you have symptoms because your vital force, which is the unseen force that lives inside all of us. I mean, you and I are sitting here having this beautiful conversation, and we're digesting dinner, but I'm not thinking about that. And I'm not thinking, oh, tomorrow I got to remember to go make bone marrow. And in 120 days, I have to make a whole new set of red blood cells. Your being inside you just does that. And it's not without, and you don't have to think about it. So how do your cells know to divide into 2 instead of 7.5? Well, the vital force within you is what makes all of that run. And so when you're good and healthy and strong, that vital force runs everything in perfect harmony. But when you have something happens to you where you have a head injury, for example, and after that you have chronic headaches and you're irritable or you're depressed or you can't work or you can't sleep, that's because your vital force has taken a big hit. And so when each time the vital force takes a hit, it develops a set of symptoms. And those symptoms are the language that the vital force communicates and says, I need this. I need the energy of this. And so in homeopathy, we have these remedies that we are trained to listen to the language in someone's story and translate that into the language of the vital force.
I'm loving this.
Isn't this great?
It's so interesting. Yeah.
It's so fabulous. I mean, I loved being a surgeon. I just, especially in OBGYN, we do all the surgeries you do are laparoscopically now with these amazingly cool instruments. But once I became a homeopath and I got the answer to my question about why are these women after their hysterectomy depressed and fat and have no sex drive, it's because I did that to them. I took out an organ and I made a hole in their chi field, is how the Chinese would think of it. And so when I did that, I disrupted their vital force, and the vital force then had to communicate that there was a problem, and it did it by producing symptoms. So once I became a homeopath, I was like, oh, all these women that have no sex drive, now I know what remedy they need. And so I would give them the remedy and their sex drive would come back.
Even though the organ might be missing.
Even though the organ was missing, because you're removing the scar I left on their vital force when I took their uterus out. So it was one thing when I didn't know any better, but once I knew how bad it was to take an organ out of the system, out of someone, and once God knew that I knew, then I was like, damn. And so I had to give it up. So what I did instead was I became a really good homeopath so I could help people who had bleeding. I could fix their bleeding without having to take their uterus out.
Wasn't that part of the Hippocratic Oath, to do no harm?
First, do no harm.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
A lot of us are doing harm, not knowing it.
And not knowing it. And it's one thing if you don't know any better, but once you know better, and like I said, God knew that I knew, and I know now that God knows that I know.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I gave up my surgical specialty, and I mean, for a long time I did both. All my surgical patients all got homeopathic remedies. Before surgery, in the hospital, then afterwards. All my moms, when I delivered their babies, they all got remedies. Babies got remedies. And so once I was able to help them without having to do surgery, then I had to give up my surgical practice.
I get that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you what conditions can be addressed with homeopathy. But when you said 5,000 different,
right,
I'm starting to think a lot. So answer that question.
So anything that you can go to a regular doctor for and get a drug to suppress the symptom, a homeopathic remedy properly chosen can cure those things. So colds, flu, fibromyalgia, bladder infections, ear infections, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, ADD, ADHD, chronic depression, suicidal depression, appendicitis. I treated a woman with acute appendicitis without surgery. And that's in my first book. That was a great story. And I'd been a homeopath, it seemed like, for 20 minutes at that point. I was young in my homeopathic career.
Now, you've written a book called What's the Remedy for That?
Right.
And there's it's like an encyclopedia of conditions or symptoms, as you're
Yes.
saying. And then what are the different homeopathic remedies that can be applied? And sometimes there's different, distinctions between a headache where I think I read one place where you said if you want to put your head up against something,
Yes.
there's the headache behind the left eye or the right eye
Right.
or whatever. But this is for the lay person.
Yes.
And because the question would have with 5,000 remedies out there, you'd think you'd need to be, you'd have to learn about hedgehogs, which most people aren't going to do.
That's right.
But you've given us here a resource for the average person for the things like you just mentioned, flu and colds and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. Say a little more about the book, because I think it's a great resource.
Thank you. I loved writing it. It was an amazing thing. I woke up at 4:30. It was the day after the election. And I thought, well, now that I'm not reading the newspaper, I'm not reading the New York Times and the Huffington Post cover to cover every day
Right.
and watching Rachel. Okay, so you know my politics. I thought, okay, well, I have to do something else to spend my time with because I just can't, couldn't read anymore. And so I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and I thought, you know what, it's time to write this book. And I pulled my computer, my laptop onto my lap, and I wrote this book in bed every morning from 4:30 in the morning until about 7:45. And I would just write all this, 25 years of homeopathic experience in my practice. It kind of just downloaded into my fingers. But about 7:30, 7:45, it was like, okay, the doors to heaven closed, and that was it. And if I tried to work on it in the evening, it didn't work. So what I did was I wrote this book, and I went to the health food store, and I looked at the Boiron display of all the 60 remedies they have that cover 60 different conditions, everything from allergies to warts. And I covered just the remedies that you can get in the health food store. So for example, if you have a baby that has colic and you're not sure what remedy to give, all you know that you're driving your baby around in the car in the middle of the night trying to get him to go to sleep, or you put the baby on the dryer to get him to go to sleep at night because they're in pain. There's 2 remedies that are available in the health food store, and if you don't know which one to get, you put a hot water bottle on your baby's tummy. And if the baby likes that, then they need the one remedy. If they kick it off and try to bite you, or they scream louder because the heat aggravates them, they need a different remedy. So those are the things I put in the book. Simple things like that.
That's fascinating. Now, so you don't need special training for what's in here. Anyone can read.
Yes.
And do what you tell them to do.
That's right.
It's valuable. Now, you shared about taking the uterus out, and you were still able to recreate the energy and all that. What's one of your most fascinating cases? I'm just curious.
Okay, so I guess I'll tell you the story about the woman who had acute appendicitis. So I was in my office, and I was trying to decide if I was going to really continue to do homeopathy or not, because I had studied for 2 years with a teacher, and I would try applying the way that she taught it, and it didn't work. It only worked like 10% of the time. And I thought, you know what? If I could only do a hysterectomy correctly 1 out of 10 times, do you think my hospital would give me privileges? No, they would not. And so I had that same standard about, well, if I can't be as good a homeopath as I am a surgeon, then I'm not interested. And so I almost quit. But I had come to homeopathy through prayer, and I basically made another prayer. I said, okay, God, I thought homeopathy was going to be the thing. I thought I got a sign. So you got to show me if this is right or not. So I went to a conference, and I saw a video of Alphonse Gukens of blessed memory. He's a Belgian homeopath who since has passed on. But he showed a video of a young child that he took care of with acute appendicitis. And I remember thinking, oh, now I'm going to learn how you give homeopathy on the way to the operating room. He just gave the baby the remedy and watched her go to sleep. And then I watched him give her the video ran the whole time. And he gave the baby the remedy every hour and a half until it was well. And then sent the baby home. And then she came back the next day. She was maybe 6 or 7. I should say baby. She was a small child. And she came back the next morning, and she's sitting here in the same dress she was in the night before, because she fell asleep in the car on the way home. And she's sitting here eating breakfast. And he pulls up her little shirt, no scar, and he can mash on her tummy, whereas before he couldn't touch it. And I thought, well, maybe there was something to this. 4 days later, I'm in my office. They call me from the ER, and they had one of my patients who'd been there since 4 in the morning. Positive CT scan, acute fever, a chronic abdomen where she could just barely touch her, and she was so in such pain. And the surgeon who was on duty came to see her, and when they found out that she didn't have any insurance, he cursed her and her husband. How dare you show up in my emergency room without insurance, blah, blah, blah. And the husband's like, you're not touching my wife, and we're going to sign out against medical advice. So they call me, and I'd seen her maybe twice, 2 years before, and they said, well, will you take care of her? I'm like, sure. So they sent her to my office, which frankly they shouldn't have. They should have made me come to the hospital. I didn't know she was that sick. So she comes hobbling down the hallway, and the look on her face, the way she held herself, the hair on the back of my neck stood up because it was the same face, the same energy as that child I had seen on the video 4 days before. And I think I'd been a homeopath. It felt like maybe 20 minutes at that point. I had only 10 remedies, but I happened to have this remedy that he had given this child. And it's a remedy that you give when they have so much pain, and the slightest motion is what just sends them through the roof. And there's a particular remedy for that. So I said to her husband, look, we're going to do an experiment. I didn't have him sign a consent or anything. I said, look, we're going to do an experiment. I'm going to give your wife this remedy, because she was so sick, she was almost unconscious. I said, I'm going to give her this remedy, and if I don't see a change in 20 minutes, I'm taking her to the hospital. I'll take her appendix out. You can pay me in chickens for the next 2 years, and the hospital has to take you because, she's really sick. He's like, all right. And I had one of those little baby thermometers you put on somebody's forehead. Her fever was like 102.8. So I put the thermometer on her forehead, give her the remedy. She falls asleep on my back exam table, and I watch her temperature drop. Within about an hour and a half, it was down to 100. And I thought, all right. And she slept the whole time. And then she woke up in an hour and a half, and her pain, which she said on a scale of 1 to 10 was about a 12. I said, how is it now? She goes, about a 7. I gave her another dose of the remedy, and I repeated that dose every hour and a half. And at 6 o'clock that night, I sent her and her husband home with a bottle of the remedies and said, here's my home phone number. It rings next to my bed. And when she wakes up in the middle of the night, you call me. So he calls me at 2 in the morning. He goes, she's starving. She wants to eat. I'm like, no. She can have clear liquids. Give her another dose of the remedy. And by the time she left my office, I could mash on her belly, and she was completely well. So she calls me back the next morning at 9:30 in the morning. And, actually, I'd said to her, you need to call me first thing in the morning. So it's 9:15. I'm in my office. I don't hear from her. I call her, no answer. I'm like, I'm in trouble. So I'm like, call me as soon as call me. And so she called me right back, and she said, sorry, I was out walking my dog. And to this day, they moved away, but as far as I know, she still has her appendix. So then I thought, all right, I just need a different teacher. So then I found a master homeopath to study with.
That's fascinating. I wish we had a whole hour to
I know,
devote.
it's fun, isn't it?
No, I'm going to put you in my most interesting guest hall of fame.
Oh, gosh, thank you.
It's fascinating, and I think it's something we all need to know about because most people don't. And the amount of unnecessary suffering that people are experiencing for lack of awareness of these things. So 2 things I want to say to end this is, one is this book is an incredibly useful book. What's the remedy for that? And it's a homeopathic guide for the layperson to handle most stuff that we confront. But if someone wanted to consult with you individually, they wanted to come to you perhaps as a patient or consult with you, or they wanted to hire you as a speaker because we've just seen you're a fascinating speaker. This message needs to get out.
Yes.
How do they contact you?
So they can go to my website at drkathifry.com. So I spell my name Dr. D-R-K-A-T-H-I-F-R-Y. So drkathifry.com.
Very good.
And I'm on a mission to spread the word about this because I just love it.
Well, you are well equipped to be a missionary.
Yeah,
You've got the juice, as they say.
Thank you.
And I love what you're doing. It's so important.
I just love doing it. I keep doing it until I'm a little old lady.
Keep it up, my dear.
Thank you, Jack.
Keep it up, my dear.
Thank you so much.
So get this book. You gave me a copy.
Yes, I did.
It's going in my kitchen in the cabinet where all my vitamins and things
right.
are. And I love it. What's the remedy for that? Check her out. Stick around. We'll be right back after this message.